You ever been in one of those debates where both sides sound like they're saying the exact same thing? It gets so confusing. How do you actually tell who knows their stuff and who's just talking? Well, what if I told you there's a technique for that, one that's about 2,500 years old? It's just a simple set of questions that can cut right through the noise. And the whole story starts with a challenge. So picture this, a group of ancient monks, and they are completely stumped. They've just been cornered by a rival group of teachers who hit them with this very question. The rivals are basically saying, hey, look, we both teach people how to understand pleasure and beauty and feelings. So what's actually the difference between what you teach and what we teach? And the monks, they had nothing. No answer. And this is really the heart of the problem, right? It's a challenge of telling things apart. When two philosophies, or, two products today, make the exact same claims, how are you supposed to know which one has any real substance? The monks were totally stuck. So they did what you do when you're stuck. They took the problem to their teacher, the Buddha, hoping he could clear things up. And you can totally see why they were so confused. I mean, the wanderer's claim sounds pretty solid. We teach the understanding of sensual pleasures, check. Of forms, check. Of feelings, check. On paper, it looks identical. The monks were just caught in the middle. They couldn't agree with them, but they couldn't really find a good reason to disagree either. So the monks take this whole puzzle to their teacher. But he doesn't just give them a simple answer. No, he gives them something much better. He gives them a method, a tool they can use to figure out not just this problem, but pretty much any problem like it. And it all boils down to one very specific line of questioning. And this is the absolute key. The Buddha tells them, go back to those teachers and ask them this simple three-part question. When you talk about these things, what is the gratification, what is the drawback, and what is the escape? He pretty much predicted that the rival teachers would just draw a blank, because you can only answer all three if you have a really deep insight into the topic. So let's break this down. First, you've got gratification. That's the appeal, right? The fun part, the pleasure, the reason we're drawn to something in the first place. Then, second, you have the drawback. This is the price you pay, the hidden cost, the problem that it creates down the line. And third, there's the escape. This is the path out, the real solution that actually gets you beyond the whole problem. The idea is you don't truly understand anything until you can clearly define all three of these. Okay, so let's take this tool for a test drive. We'll start with the first thing on that list, sensual pleasures. I mean, we all know what pleasure feels like, but let's see what happens when we really analyze it with this three-part question. First up, gratification. This part's a no-brainer. It's the pleasure, the happiness we get from our five senses. You know, a beautiful sunset, a great song, an amazing meal. That's the appeal. It's immediate, it's powerful, and everyone gets it. No one's arguing with this part. But then we get to the drawback. And this is where the analysis gets really, really interesting. The text argues that chasing pleasure isn't just some small issue. It calls it a mass of suffering that just grows and snowballs, all starting from that one simple initial desire. It all starts on a personal level. Just to get the things that bring us pleasure, we have to struggle, right? We face hardship, stress, maybe even danger. And then if we succeed and get what we want, what's next? We get anxious about losing it. And if we do lose it, we're overwhelmed with grief. It's just this relentless cycle of work and worry. But it doesn't just stop with us. The text says that this personal struggle inevitably spills outward. Because we want these same pleasures, relationships start to crack, friends turn on each other, families argue, and it can even scale up to the point where entire nations go to war. That little bit of personal anxiety basically metastasizes into huge social and political conflicts. And the escalation continues. When that desire gets desperate enough, it can lead people to commit crimes, theft, lying, even violence. And of course, that leads to punishment. The text is pretty graphic here, describing things from beatings all the way to executions. It's a really stark chain of events, showing how a simple search for pleasure can spiral into a complete breakdown of society. That's the full drawback. So after hearing all that, what's the escape? What's the way out? Well, according to the text, the path isn't to just find a better or safer kind of pleasure. The only real escape is to go to the root of the problem itself, to remove and just let go of the desire and the greed for pleasure. It's a pretty radical solution for sure.
So, does this framework hold up for other things? Let's test it on the second item from the Wanderer's list, forms. And here, what they really mean is physical beauty and appearance. So let's ask the question, what's the gratification, drawback, and escape of beauty?
The gratification, again, is obvious. It's that simple joy we get from looking at a beautiful person or a beautiful object. But the text immediately pivots to the drawback with this really sharp question. It basically asks us to imagine that same beauty, but years from now. And then it asks, hasn't it vanished? Hasn't the drawback become obvious? The problem, it argues, is just time itself. And to really drive this point home, the text gives us this unflinching timeline of decay. I mean, it doesn't pull any punches. It asks you to picture that beautiful form when it's old and frail, then after death as a corpse, then as a skeleton, and finally as nothing more than dust. It is incredibly intense, but it's all to illustrate one simple, unavoidable fact: form is impermanent. Its very nature is to fall apart. That is its drawback. So, what's the escape from being attached to something so temporary? By now, you're probably starting to see the pattern. The logic is totally consistent. The only way out is to remove the desire, the greed for forms themselves. To just let go of your attachment to something that by its very nature can't possibly last.
All right, on to the third and final subject, feelings. And this one might be the most subtle of them all, because it's not about something out there in the world. This is about our own inner experience, our happiness, our sadness, all of it.
So let's look at this final breakdown. For gratification, the text uses the highest possible example, not just simple pleasure, but that deep, hurtless bliss you might feel in a state of meditation. But here's the kicker. Even that, the absolute best internal feeling you can have, has a drawback. And it's the same fundamental issue we've seen twice now. All feelings, even the most sublime ones, are impermanent. They show up, and then they leave. They're perishable. And so, the escape? You know it by now. The same consistent logic. The only path out is to remove the desire and greed for even the best of feeling.
And this brings us back to the final answer for the monks. The ability to actually spell out the gratification, the drawback, and the escape for anything. That is the sign of true understanding. That was the difference. It's not about just claiming you get it. It's about being able to show this complete three-dimensional analysis.
3. That's it. That's all it takes. 3 questions to tell the difference between a superficial claim and a really deep insight. It's like a simple diagnostic tool for cutting through all the noise. It forces you to look right past the shiny, appealing surface of something and ask about the full story, the full consequences, and whether there's a real way out.
And that really leaves us with a final thought. This is not just some ancient abstract debate. It's a really practical framework. Think about our relationship with technology, or our career paths, or even our shopping habits. What could we understand on a much deeper level if we just took a second to ask this 2,500-year-old set of questions? What's the real gratification? What is the full drawback? And what's the genuine escape?